Hello once again and greetings. Last time we talked about why I use Arch Linux as my distribution of choice. Today I will be talking about why I use i3-gaps as my window manager or desktop environment. Um, Once again, these are just my opinions, these are my thoughts, and I will say, use what works for you. Don't take this as I'm trying to make you do things a certain way. That's the power of Linux. We can make it do whatever we want and repurpose it for whatever we choose to do it. And I'm just giving a few of my reasons for why I choose to use it the way that I do. Um, for those of you that don't know, i3 is a window manager. It's I mean, I guess there's a fine line between a desktop environment is the graphical user interface, the that we use to interface with our operating system. Um, of a some desktop environments you might be familiar with are GNOME, KDE or Plasma 5, XFCE, Cinnamon, etc., etc. However, there are these other um, not so much desktop environments. They're called window managers. And I guess there's a fine line between a window manager and a full-on desktop environment. I'm not sure where that line is. I'm sure you guys will debate it in the comment sections. Maybe somebody can explain it to me. I'm always willing to learn. Um, and I'm interested to hear people's opinions on this one. Um, for me, I use something called i3, which is a basic window manager. It's a tiling window manager, and what that means is that when you open up an application, let's say Waterfox, it automatically takes up the whole screen. Now, in my particular case, I'm using something called i3-gaps, and what that does is if I was just using the plain i3 window manager, this would have taken up the whole entire screen. However, I use i3-gaps, and that puts like a few gaps between the application, and the status bar and the desktop. However, let's say I want to open up another application. Let's say I want to open up a file manager. In this case, Ranger. What you saw just now is it tiled it. And what that means is that, here, let me get myself out of the way here so you can see. As you could tell, it automatically split the screen in half. And I can make it go to the bottom. I can make it go to the left. I can make it go to the right. And the way I'm doing that is with simple keyboard shortcuts. And today I'll be explaining why I choose to use this kind of simplified window manager over any desktop environment. And I can make it open up, going on the bottom there. And today I'll be explaining why I choose to run something like this, And I'm sure many of you are wondering, why would somebody run something like this? However, I'll be going through the reasons why I choose to do so. My first reason, as before when I was explaining why I choose to run Arch, is KISS. Keep it simple, stupid. And once again, I do believe that my other four reasons will tie into this first reason. Again, I do believe that keeping it simple keeps it stable, keeps it predictable, and overall leads to a better experience, in my humble opinion. And that brings me to my next reason. The second reason is little to no bloat. In the past, I've tried many different desktop environments, and I found myself not so much distro hopping as I landed on Arch a pretty long time ago. But I did find myself desktop environment hopping, and I would jump between GNOME, KDE, Cinnamon, etc., and I would find things I liked about each one and things I didn't like about each one. And a couple examples, I tend to use more GTK apps, so I do like GNOME because it makes all my applications look uniform. And a lot of the apps that I use are GNOME or GTK3, which I think tend to be more compatible with GNOME. However, GNOME, it took a lot of tweaking for me to get it the way I like it, a lot of extensions, and again, I run Arch, which means I'm on a rolling release, which means I get the latest and greatest version of everything, including GNOME. And what I found with the extensions, GNOME extensions, is that the next point release would break my extensions. And it's not the fault of GNOME or the developers of the extensions. They try their best, but sometimes they don't make it in time for the next release. And it would break it. With KDE, I prefer KDE as a core for a desktop environment. However, some KDE or Plasma applications I found to be buggy, resource heavy, such as on the online accounts. I had an issue with syncing my Google account to it and such, and it didn't look like there was a fix anywhere in sight on their forums. I started watching different Linux channels where people such as Luke Smith and DistroTube, and they were using this minimal window manager, and it looked like it just had what they needed, and I said to myself, I want that. I want to have a minimal environment that's no bloat, just what I want, just what works, and I landed on i3. And yeah, it leads to much, and that in turn leads to stability. The previous reason I listed it does lead into this one. The fact that a window manager is very minimal means there's less to it, which means there's less potential for breakage. There's more predictability. Every time I log into i3, it's exactly the way I left it before. And I had to do some extra legwork to get NVIDIA Optimus working on i3 with the light display manager. However, other than that, it's been very stable, very predictable, and it just works. It works the way I have it set up to work. And my next reason, and I might get some hate over this one, is it's kind of easy. It's very easy to understand the config file for i3. And I myself am not a coder. I'm not a developer. However, when I took a look at this is the config file for i3. All your settings and keyboard bindings are in this file. And I found it to be very simple to understand, even for someone who can, barely use the printf function in C. And I was able to look at this, find out, okay, this is how I get things to start up at startup, and this is how I bind keys, and it's very easy to read it. It's between the documentation on i3's website and the just looking at the file at the syntax here, it's very simple to figure out how to get things working the way you want it to. And that again leads to KISS for me is, keep it simple. And this to me, all my settings in one file, as opposed to going through a settings manager app, I find it to be surprisingly simple and surprisingly stable. And this leads me to my last point, which is the simplicity and workflow of a tiling window manager. I guess I'm kind of repeating myself with this, constantly bringing up the simplicity of it. But in this case, I'll bring it up in the case of the workflow. And like I said with i3, everything is a keyboard shortcut. And it was a bit of a learning curve. It really was. But now that I got used to it, it actually feels more natural doing it that way than it did with the mouse and keyboard. And that's completely preference. Some of you may disagree, and that's fine. However, for me, once I got used to the keyboard shortcuts, it began feeling more natural to me. And that's just for me as keeping it simple. And I use a thing called i3-blocks up here to get these little widgets or applets, whatever you want to call them, working. And I'm going to include this into the simplicity of the workflow. Is that when I bought my new laptop, all I had to do to get my settings for i3 working again was copy over my i3-block scripts that I, by the way, got from Luke Smith's GitHub page, and copy over my i3 config file and my i3-blocks config file, and put them all in the right spots, restart i3, and then boom, it just worked for me. All my keyboard shortcuts exactly the way I had it on my old laptop. And I will include that in the workflow because it made the transition from an old laptop to my new one so much easier and so much simpler. Once again, I will conclude by saying that these are my opinions, these are my thoughts, and this kind of workflow may not be for everybody. And I'll be interested to hear your thoughts in the comments down below. Thank you and have a great day.